wrong thing. That's not the trigger. Alright, it's got a little kick to it. Alright, this past weekend I went to the range and I got a really sharp reminder about why the buttstock and the ergonomics of your rifle matter, particularly when shooting with Magnums. The proper type of buttstock and the proper type of setup can actually make your shooting experience with something like a Magnum rifle or a 30-06, family of rifle that kicks a little more than your standard short action. It can entirely change the experience you have with a rifle, and you need to consider that when you're building one, putting together, or buying one. So stick with me and find out why. All right, the buttstock matters for Magnums. It really, really does. Okay, you not only need a good, rubbery buttstock on the back end, something with a rubber, stopper like that to help absorb the recoil, but Magnums have a way more dramatic recoil impulse than something like this Remington Model 7 100 dozen 6.5 Creedmoor. Okay, this is a very heavy rifle. This is about 13 pounds as it is, maybe close to 14. And the shape of the stock and the buttstock and everything, especially shooting prone, this is more exaggerated when shooting prone. It is almost, the recoil you feel from this type of rifle is almost negligible when it's set up with a muzzle brake. It's really heavy barrel, and the proper size buttstock really can help, mitigate or tame down a lot of the recoil in just the way that the force of the rifle pushes back against you. And I'm going to give a demonstration here. This part right here I call the heel of the rifle, which some people may call this the heel and this the tip or something. I don't know, whatever. This is the heel. Where that sits on your collarbone position and everything, and in the pocket of your shoulder here, right under your chin, whatever, is going to make a difference in the recoil too. But how high it sits can make a pretty dramatic difference in the felt recoil and the impulse of the rifle and how it actually drives back. So if you have something nice and high like this, so the comb of this rifle is pretty darn close to just under the center of the axis of the bore. So the force of the energy from the rifle is going to drive more straight back like this. So that's going to give you a much more soft recoil impulse overall in most rifles, okay? In a rifle like this, something with a small caliber, it doesn't matter quite as much. But when you get prone on a rifle, it does change the dynamics, especially if you're too low. And this is what I was finding the other day with the Thompson Center Encore and 280 Active Improved. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, where I kind of relearned a lesson that I had forgotten about because of the way I usually set my rifles up versus this old school style rifle. We'll get to that. But getting too low on your bipods and getting too low on the ground with the rifle actually puts that force further down into, this, for me personally, into a position where it's just riding on bone. I don't have meat, I have bone that's supporting that rifle. Now, if I have a nice tall comb like this with a tall heel, then I've got a lot more padding right there in my shoulder, so it absorbs more recoil and it's more comfortable that way. But as I experienced the other day with my Thompson Center, the heel of the rifle is actually a lot lower. Okay, so if you look at the heel here compared to the axis of the bore, it is a good inch or more lower than the axis of the bore, or lower than even the bottom of the bore. So you have that heel set lower, and that lends itself to, when prone, I learned really quickly, being a little bit too much contact with the bone right here versus in the meat where I want it to be right there. So I was like way down on this thing, and it was my bad. I should have adjusted my position, but I was just excited about shooting, so I didn't really think about it, and I kept slapping that clavicle bone with just the heel and a rock. This thing rocks. So look at the shape here. The force is coming less back with this thing like that and more up like that. So you're getting blam, blam, and it's just bam, kicking you like a little donkey kick with that heel right in the clavicle. Now, a stock like this is, for guns like this, are typically set up for more of an iron sight type of shooting situation, or more of a low profile optic or sight type of situation. They're not made for, prone shooting, with tall optics, big optics, whatever, and from higher positions like that. They're made to bring the gun up to your face like this versus having your face down in line, more like the tactical PRS type of thing. So it's just a different style of stock to what I'm used to, and it sits a little lower. I had the same problem with my Ruger American, has the same type of stock on it with a really low heel behind the comb. And I noticed shooting prone that I was just catching that heel. Now it's a 6 arc, so it's not anything to worry about, but I was catching that heel directly on the clavicle and getting more of this type of force with the recoil versus this type of force with the recoil. And this type of force with recoil is much easier to take than this is. This is more dramatic. And I'm gonna roll in some footage here and you will see what I'm talking about with this Thompson center. So check this out. My gosh, that's screaming fast. Already like that. Okay, now granted, I didn't have a break on this thing yet, and the 30-06 family of cartridges, they generally, from the numbers I can find online, I haven't tested this myself, but the generally accepted number range for foot-pounds of energy on the recoil is about 18, maybe 15 to 18. The 280 Ackley improved being around that 16, 17, 18 mark of recoil energy, recoil impulse, foot-pounds of energy going backward. Compare that with something, and that's without a brake. So compare that with something like the 7 PRC without a brake, you're looking about 25, 26, 27 foot-pounds of energy coming back on you without a brake and stuff like that. So the 7 PRC, excuse me, definitely recoils much worse when compared to the 280. It's almost 10 pounds, 10 units of measure, foot-pounds, whatever you call it, higher than the 280 Ackley improved. But in this case, when comparing the two, my 280 Ackley without a brake and my 7 PRC with a brake, the 7 PRC is much more manageable to shoot right now, as it was. It was much more manageable to shoot. So I'm gonna roll in some footage with that, with the 7 PRC here, so you can actually see the recoil impulse from bipods. It's gonna change a little bit when you have them clamped into like a tripod or something like that. But from bipods, the recoil impulse from this 7 PRC is much more manageable than the 280 AI was to begin with. All right, if you notice the field stock that I have on this thing, again, the heel, the comb is high enough to get good high cheek weld, all that good stuff, but the heel of this thing is just below the center line of the actual axis to the bore. So whenever I'm down on, even if I'm down prone on this thing, and it has a muzzle brake, so even if I'm down prone nice and low, I'm still getting more recoil energy straight back versus up and donkey kicking like that and digging into bone and clavicle and that kind of thing, which can be more painful. Because I've shot through the 7 PRC, I've got hundreds of rounds to it by now. At least it's over a couple hundred, let's put it that way. It's over a couple hundred rounds to it. I've never gotten any bruising or petechiae or anything like that on my clavicles, and I've shot it in all kinds of different positions. So two things, got a muzzle brake for the Thompson center for sure, because the 280 AI is a 30-06 family of cartridge. It's not quite a Magnum, but it is going to kick more. So I got a muzzle brake on that. Hopefully that'll tame things down, and I'm gonna set up a better shooting position. I would like to find a stock that has a little bit higher comb, because I still need about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch for cheek weld there, because it's still a little low, and a higher heel as well in conjunction. So maybe bringing the recoil impulse more in line with the bore and bringing it more straight back versus up and donkey kick. So the main takeaway here is that when you're putting together a rifle, like a Magnum rifle, if you're not going to run it with a brake, then I would highly suggest getting a stock or finding a stock or having one made that has a little bit higher of a heel in relation to the axis of the bore here, and a high enough comb or an adjustable comb cheek piece for your eye, line of sight and cheek weld and all that good stuff. And I would definitely take more consideration and care when you set up your shooting position. If you're going to be down low on bipods, maybe bring your bipods up a little bit, let them out a few notches, come up so you have more of your body contacting. So instead of being down like this, nice and snuggled in tight on the rifle, almost laying on the floor, you're going to catch most of that recoil impulse down on that heel, and you might even catch some scope bite in the eyeball. So you're getting more of that stuff, versus if you come up just a little bit, you've got more of that heel above your clavicle, and more of the rubber of the butt pad actually into soft squishy meat of your pectorals, and your bipods are a little higher. You might actually find it easier just to get on target when you're shooting really low and flat on the ground. So I would never suggest just straight burying the bipods at their lowest setting into the ground and flattening out behind them. And I don't normally, but I also too, when I'm shooting groups, a lot of times I'll shoot off of my tripod, and it's actually a little higher than my bipod, so it's up off the ground about 6 to 9 inches more, or well, 9 inches or so, where my bipods are only like 6 inches, maybe 5.5. And so that forces me down into that more awkward position where the clavicle bone here is exposed. You're gonna catch more recoil there. It's gonna seem and feel like, even with a lighter kicking Magnum, like the 280 Ackley, it's gonna feel like you're getting a lot more than you really are. And it's going to be uncomfortable to shoot. So that's my suggestion. Positional shooting, especially with Magnums, the buttstock really matters with your Magnums. The muzzle brake, key. I would definitely say run a muzzle brake on a Magnum if you can. I prefer heavier rifles anyway, and that 7 to 9 pound range is dry without a scope on them, without ammo. So I don't mind carrying a heavy rifle. I'm still young enough to do it, you know, honestly. And, you know, as I get older, it may change. It may be a little different. So if I get to the point in my life where I'm only carrying mountain rifles, I'm not going to be carrying Magnums anymore anyway. I'm going to be shooting nice light stuff, getting in as close as I can with a light rifle. So, but for right now, I can still handle carrying around a heavier rifle. So I build my Magnums a little bit heavier, and it works out really well because this 7 PRC is extremely pleasant to shoot. There's nothing unpleasant about it. It's got some kick, definitely. You can't stay on target with it like you can with a 6 ARC. You just can't. You're gonna have to reset yourself and get, okay, back in your scope and take your next shot. But it doesn't hurt, it's not painful. This 280 Ackley I improved after a few rounds was getting pretty painful. The position was bad. I didn't take the time to reset it. I was kind of rushing on the range because we had the storms moving in and stuff like that. And that's my bad, that's my mistake. And I haven't shot a rifle with that type of ergonomics in a while to where it mattered as much, because this one was set up from the beginning with the brake and with the higher cheek comb and the higher, you know, heel and all that good stuff. So I didn't really notice it at first with this one. I didn't really have any unpleasant experiences, but as soon as I started shooting this thing, I was like, yeah, no, I need to rethink the way I'm shooting this rifle, because it's accurate. That's the thing, is this, I will still manage to get some really accurate groups out of this rifle. First couple I shot, I haven't gotten a lot of testing into it yet, but it was very accurate. Even with me flinching like a little 12-year-old, it was pretty stinking accurate. And I like that. I like what I see with the capability of the rifle itself. So now that I got a muzzle brake on it, I'm gonna set up a little better position for a better buttstock weld to my shoulder, you know, getting it more into the meat versus on top of the bone, get in a better position there. I think the next range trip's gonna go much better, be much more pleasant, because I've heard from everybody I've talked to that shoots the 280 Ackley that it's a very mild round. But even a mild round in bad ergonomics, in a bad stock position, or even just a bad range position, can feel really uncomfortable really quick. So just some things to consider when you're setting up a Magnum, or you're setting up a rifle in general, or if you're recoil sensitive, if you're somebody who even just shooting short actions and stuff like that, you just don't like recoil impulse, and it just kind of, you know, causes you to shoot unwell or causes you to flinch or whatever. Because I know people who shoot 308s that still, you know, they can be a little flinchy if you're too lightweight with your 308. So set it up with the purpose of, you know, like purposefully. Set it up purposefully for mitigating the recoil impulse, or at least driving the recoil impulse away from being something like this and more to something like this. Because this type of thing, snuggled nice into your body, this is a little more easy for your body to take. You have more spring that way. Here it's just impact. You're taking an impact. It's like somebody's chopping on your shoulder blade here with their hand, like a ridge hand strike or something like that. And you may be tough, but that eventually starts to hurt. You know what I'm saying? And after a long range session, it's not gonna be pleasant anymore. So thank y'all for joining me again today. Don't forget to keep your knife sharp, keep your powder dry, keep your magazines loaded. Y'all be blessed.